Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the 3 Point Weekly, your place for all things NBA news, debates, and discussions. And today we're going to have a few discussions and grading of all of the madness that happened at NBA trade deadline. One of the craziest NBA trade deadlines we've had in recent memory. So we got a lot to talk about. We're going to waste no time. We're going to get right into it. We're going to start off with the first trade of the week. Tyrese Haliburton getting sent to Cleveland. Cleveland trying to show themselves as a competitive team across the top of the Eastern Conference, adding some perimeter help alongside Darius Garland. I'll get your thoughts on this first, Gabe, on LeVert getting sent to Cleveland as Ricky Rubio gets sent the other way.
So I just want to preface this with saying this really might have been the greatest trade deadline we've ever seen. At least in my time as an NBA fan, I feel like I've never seen it like this active with the level of names that have been traded. And starting with this one, Tyrese Haliburton, while that's maybe more of like a mid-level name, obviously not like a bench warmer, but not a star player either. So kind of in that like level, maybe above the average level of player that you usually see traded, but still a really quality player. And I think that he'll fit really good in Cleveland. I think he's a good guy to just give him the ball, allow him to score some points. And next to Garland, a guy who's a heavy playmaker, I think that's a pretty good guard to have next to him. I think even in the list that I'm looking at, it mentions that he reunites with Jarrett Allen, who he's played with before. So I think that chemistry also plays into things. And just a really good pickup for them overall. I really like it. I think it pushes them towards maybe competing, making a push towards like the conference finals almost.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like this trade was like the most inevitable trade that we talked about it so many times. Like that's the perfect fit for Cleveland, and it happened. So I'm glad that Karras is, now on a competitive team. The Cavs are getting exactly what they needed. He's already had some good moments so far with them, and he's back in Ohio. He's from the great state of Ohio, so shout out to him. And yeah, the W trade, like this is probably just an A move, overall. And like you said, Gabe, I think this makes the Cavs a little more dangerous when it gets to talking about postseason basketball.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything was said there. A great trade. They didn't have to give up a ton of future assets to get him, only a 2022 protected first-round pick. Ricky Rubio's an expiring contract. As much as he's been great for them this year, he's going to be a free agent anyways. So good move for them. Didn't have to give up a ton of future assets. And a nice perimeter player now to have alongside Darius Garland with Sexton out for the rest of the year. Moving along to the next trade that followed was another guard getting moved in CJ McCullum. He got sent to the New Orleans Pelicans as he now gets to be a primary guard in the backcourt with Brandon Ingram and hopefully at some point in time Zion, and a move for the Pelicans to try and get themselves into the playoffs and keep Zion hopefully a little bit happier. But I'll get your thoughts again now, Tyrik, on what you thought of CJ McCullum now getting his own backcourt in New Orleans.
I'm happy for CJ. I found out that the Blazers gave him a chance to pick where he got traded, which was kind of interesting. I didn't know he kind of earned that right, but I'm happy for him. He's in a situation where he'll be able to be the main guard in the backcourt. And I think him and B.I. is going to be a very good tandem on the perimeter. And hopefully whenever Zion comes back, whether it's this season or next season, they got a good-looking big three on the offensive side of the floor. There's still a lot of questions about that team defensively, but as far as just needing some veteran presence on that roster, they got that in CJ. He is making a lot of money, but nobody's going to go to New Orleans, and that's probably the best player that they get. For the Blazers, I just feel like I still don't understand what they're trying to do. They got back Josh Hart, and then they traded Nikhil to Utah. It's just a weird situation. I thought Nikhil would be a nice young piece to have, but they decided to ship him away. Blazers are just, they're in kind of dismay right now. But for the Pelicans, I'll give this I'll say a B, just because I still got questions about the defense, but a B is cool for this trade right now.
Yeah, for the Pelicans, I kind of like that B grade. I think McCollum, once Zion comes back, if Zion comes back, probably not this season, but maybe next year, I think he's a pretty good guard to have with him and Ingram. Maybe him and Ingram. I don't think the fit's perfect there, but definitely a guy that, as far as the backcourt goes, I think he'll help a lot. I think he can kind of be one of those bridge the gap type players where, you see a player like a Mike Conley next to, a Donovan Mitchell, kind of like that relationship of, Mike Conley's older and he probably only has a couple good years left, whereas like a Donovan Mitchell next to him is a lot younger. So you see like the veteran come in and maybe while they try to search for like that supporting cast and get things going, he's kind of that veteran presence that can take a couple years and really make things pretty solid for them in the near future. On the Blazers end, yeah, like you said, I really like I would think it would be like, yeah, we're just trying to rebuild, maybe bottom out, like, but they said they want to keep building around Dame. So it's like I don't really know how this trade progresses. I feel like there might have been other markets for CJ McCollum. I know his like value wasn't that high, but even to think if you're trying to build around that like a player like Damian Lillard, you probably want some more veteran guys. Whereas like I guess Josh Hart is a solid asset, but then like a protected pick, I don't know. It's like even to flip this for something later, I don't like what they received in exchange. Also for the Pelicans, while I'm on this, I do think Larry Nance Jr. is an underrated pickup for them. I think he'll be pretty solid in their front court. And I mean, their center position, they're definitely solid. They have Valanciunas there, but behind him, they don't really have anybody great. So I think as a backup front court player, once you might have Valanciunas and Zion in that starting lineup, I think he could be a good guy to play with them.
Yeah, I agree. Larry Nance is definitely an underrated pickup. He's a solid piece to have there on that front court. CJ is a good ad for them, definitely. But again, the confusing direction with the Blazers is definitely the biggest sentiment I get from this trade. Josh Hart's a fine piece. But again, like you guys have mentioned, with Dame still being there and it seems that they want to commit to building around Dame, it's just a weird limbo that they're in where they're making it seem like they want to rebuild, but they're not rebuilding. So it remains to be seen what goes on there. But good pick up of the Pelicans for CJ and Larry Nance. Two good pieces they can add and might help them to get themselves into the postseason over the next couple of years.
Forgot Larry Nance was a part of that trade. Yeah, that's a W for the Pelicans for sure. What are y'all grading it? What are y'all giving I give the Blazers a D, and I'll give the Pelicans a B.
I just need some clarification on like contracts. Do you know if Thomas Satoransky is like expiring or if Josh Hart's expiring, or will they be there for a while?
Josh Hart, I'm pretty sure just signed a 3-year extension this summer. Thomas Satoransky, I want to say, is on the last year of his deal, but I'll confirm.
I think he is.
Thomas Satoransky is on the last year of his contract. He's an expiring contract. But yeah, I
believe at this point,
the Blazers, Josh Hart still has 2 years.
That's almost like a D-F thing. I'll give it a D- just because Josh Hart can like actually contribute some things, but for the rest of the return for like a player that you could have traded years ago, and like if your goal was to build around Damian Lillard, this trigger was pulled way too late. For the Pelicans though, for what they gave up, like that's a good B+, I think, at least. Like obviously the timeline doesn't exactly fit, but for what he's bringing and for what you gave up, like your team got a lot better. And when your star player comes back, maybe like CJ's had some time to mesh with the rest of the roster. And so maybe next year they can really be a playoff team. So definitely a high grade there, a B+, I'd say.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I'd throw the Pelicans in and around a B. This is a team that definitely, if Zion can be healthy, especially, can look to push for the playoffs next year, certainly. And like you say, for the Blazers, I mean, I don't know, like they get a protected first, sure, a couple of seconds down the road. They're not getting anything significant. You got back Josh Hart and a couple of picks. Like it's nothing significant. Josh Hart's contract is non-guaranteed next year, and then he's got a player option, so you might even only have 1 year of him. It's nothing great. They're a D at best on that trade. I like the direction of trying to rebuild, but they're not committing. They're just hanging out in no man's land, even more so than they already were. And it just doesn't make any sense. Then for the move that probably shocked a lot of us the most, Tyrese Haliburton was sent away from the Sacramento Kings as the Sacramento Kings front office continues to make some interesting decisions. Domantas Sabonis heads the other way, with Buddy Hield also making his way to Indiana. Derrick, what was your thoughts?
When I first saw it, I was completely shocked. I still kind of am. And I'm kind of like trying to balance it because I see what the Kings want to do. They really just want to push for that playing spot because they just haven't had any meaningful basketball played in that city in so long. But I think long term, this is really going to hurt them. Like the short term might be cool because I like the other trades that they did make, which we'll talk about soon, to kind of supplement for losing Tyrese. But Tyrese, his ceiling, I think, is like really high. I think it's like all-star caliber every single year type of guy. And he's still like so young. He's like 21, 22 years old. He's got so much upside. And while Sabonis might be better right now, down the line, this is going to hurt them so bad. I mean, it's cool that they got rid of Buddy Hield's contract because they've been trying to trade him for years. But to just get back, pieces that are going to help you right now, but down the line, they're going to really miss what Tyrese is going to be. So it's the Kings. Like, this is just a poor decision, and it still does not make that much sense.
Yeah, the Kings, like, in the sense of what you're trying to do, I don't think that they did a bad job in the sense that they were just trying to make the playoffs and be a playoff team. And while Tyrese has high potential, since they're a team that hasn't made the playoffs in like 15 years, okay, you get Sabonis, who's a better player. Justin Holiday is a solid role player. I mean, Jeremy Lamb's been bad off the injury, but we know he can be like a solid contributor if he could get back to full health. We don't know if he'll get there, but he may. But yeah, kind of like Tyrik was alluding to, what's your ceiling here? It's like, yeah, it's cool to make the playoffs, but then once you make the playoffs, what happens after that? You become a first-round exit for maybe a year or two, if that, and then you're back to the rebuild, and then you go back to basically where you were before. So it's like, yeah, short-term gain, and it's like, yeah, you did pretty well for what you were trying to do, but I think you were trying to do the wrong thing, and it just goes to how just awful this front office is. Like, I think I was saying some of it with like a lot of the stuff I said last episode, but this team is dang near on a collision course with Seattle. This is just very questionable and really just hurts their chances of building something in the future. I felt like Tyrese was a guy that actually wanted to come in and change the culture of the team, which, I mean, culture setting to me is the most underrated aspect of building a team. That's not the guy you wanted to give away. As far as on the Pacers end, obviously a great pickup here. I think Sabonis, your ceiling was kind of limited there, him and Turner together. If you're going to keep Turner, I think Tyrese is a solid player to have next to him. You can really build some good things with Tyrese. He offers you a lot of roster flexibility, and the fact that he can just play on or off the ball, play with a lot of different players. He's very versatile, is I guess the word I would say as a guard. But the other players they received, I think like Buddy Hield and Tristan Thompson, I would want to see them somehow end up somewhere else. Like them being on the Pacers is like, I guess it's good to just have a new spot in Buddy's case. And Tristan especially, I would like to see somewhere else. I think those are guys that now that they're off the Kings, especially in Buddy's case, it'll be easier for them to get somewhere else after that and maybe play for a contender because I think they can offer good things to contenders in the future. So Tyrese is obviously he's the centerpiece and a great pickup, and whatever you're receiving in return, like just a great move for them all around. For the Pacers, I would honestly call this like an A+, just because of obviously you gave up a solid amount, but you got like a future franchise cornerstone possibly. And then the Kings, I'll have to go a C- because you like, I could give it worse than that, but I'll give it a C- from the sense that you did well for what you were trying to do, but what you were trying to do is just so bad that I can't even give you an average grade.
Yeah, I did not expect the Pacers to be able to get as good of a player or as much value as they did for Sabonis. Like, I thought there was no way the Pacers were going to get near the value back for Sabonis compared to his impact on the court for them. And I was proven wrong because apparently Sacramento were willing to give it to him. Great pickup for Indiana. Haliburton's going to be a great piece for them with their future, whether they decide to move on from Brogdon or not. And I know there's been rumors that they will, but I think either way, a backcourt with both of them is guys that can both play on or off the ball. We've seen Haliburton can be a very good catch and shoot 3-point guy. Brogdon early on in his time with the Bucks was an off the ball guard, and I still think that that's probably his best role. So either way, I think that's a good fit regardless of where they go. And then I think a Haliburton-Turner combination is going to be very strong as well. I agree with what you said, Gabe, on the sense of it'd be nice to see Buddy Hield and Tristan Thompson both moved on. I think Buddy Hield is redundant on this Pacers team, even to an extent with Chris Duarte there now anyways. I think they can fill similar roles. Maybe Duarte isn't at a level of three-point shooting that Buddy Hield is at yet, but I think ultimately they serve that same type of role and purpose on the team. And Tristan Thompson's just a depth veteran big at this point that might even be a buyout market guy. For the Kings, like you say, it's a short-term move. This is a move to win now and hopefully get in the playoffs. And their win now is win enough games to hopefully squeak in via the playing games. That's the win now. And they only have 2 years of it after this year. They've essentially created themselves a 2-year window, assuming that Sabonis doesn't resign, which given Sacramento's history is not outlandish to think. They have 2 years to make the playoffs. That's essentially what they've done to themselves, assuming they don't make the playoffs this year, which isn't impossible. But at most, they have 2 years after this year. And then they're kind of back to square one again, unless Davion Mitchell or someone they pick in this upcoming draft turns into some star alongside De'Aaron Fox. So, like you said, C minus in that area is probably a pretty fair spot for the Kings because it serves what they want to do right now, which is finally get in the playoffs. But long term, it's just going to set them back even more years when they have to start hitting the reset button again. And for the Pacers, I'm absolutely shocked they got such a good asset as Tyrese Haliburton back for Domantas Sabonis. So full credit for them. They got themselves a much better rebuild going than Portland have got after this trade deadline, after both teams have tried to make some moves to shake things up.
I mean, like, yeah, it's cool for the short term, but I'm not, like, convinced, even though they're, like, 2-0 since Sabonis has started playing, I'm just not convinced, like, that's really going to make this team that much different. And Tyrese is, like, his numbers without De'Aaron Fox, he's averaging, like, 20 points, 10 assists on great efficiency. I think 13 games without De'Aaron Fox this season. And this is just year 2 for him. So, sometimes, short-term lust is not good for your long-term goals. So I really just think this is going to come back to bite them. The only reason I'm not going to give them, like, a D or an F on this trade is because the other moves they made were okay enough to, supplement for what they're going to lose from Tyrese this season. But down the line, this is really going to hurt them. I can already tell, man.
I'm excited to see Tyrese with Brogdon, though. That's something that I'm ready for. I think they will be, like, really fun to watch together, just given that mold they have of being, like, the guy that can play on the ball or off the ball and do a lot of things. I'm really going to like that A-B with them.
Yeah, I agree. I think they can fit together really well. They both can catch and shoot off the ball. They can both play make. I think they're going to be a really good fun guard partnership. Throw that in with Miles Turner for lobs and hopefully a bit more of an expanded role for him. I mean, we've never really seen Miles Turner for an extended stretch of play actually get post looks and see if he actually has post moves at an NBA level. So it'll be interesting to see what we get from him now as well. It's a bonus out of his way.
I remember he had that, like, 42-point game earlier this season.
Yeah, he showed up for one night and then went back to, like, he had a breakout game and then immediately back down to earth. It was crazy.
Facts.
He's definitely talked some things about wanting a bigger role and not being able to show off his full skill set. So this is opportunity.
He made a bet with somebody. I think it's a rapper. I don't know his name, but he said either if he gets a number, like a top 10 hit song, or if he makes an all-star game first, like, somebody owes each other $100K. And I'm like, I don't think you're making an all-star game anytime soon, bro.
That's a lot of things that got to change for that.
Man.
A lot of things. And I hope he does it, but I don't know. That's tough.
Hoping the best for him, but
KD, Giannis, and Embiid have got 3 forward spots on locks. So
exactly.
That's tough. A few other smaller trades we had that followed that. We had KZ Okpala get moved to the Thunder, who was subsequently waived. 2026 second-round pick went the way of the Miami Heat, along with some first-round pick rearrangement for OKC. They instead are getting a first-round pick a bit later down the line from Miami as opposed to more recently, so OKC get a higher chance at it potentially being a bit of a higher pick. We then also had Bol, PJ Dozier, and a second-round pick head the way of Orlando, with the Celtics getting a 2023 second-round pick. Boston move off a bit of money. The Magic get Bol, but we're 3 years into this now, as much as Bol's just got a bit of hype around his name. Unfortunately, it might not be all that likely he has any NBA success. And then on a bit of the smaller scale, but a bit more significance, is tailoring into what we were talking about earlier with the Portland move with CJ McCollum. They then flipped Nickeil Alexander-Walker in a 3-team move. He went to the Utah Jazz. The Blazers got back Joe Ingles, Elijah Hughes, and a second-round pick. We also saw Juancho Hernan-Gomez go the way of Utah, with the Spurs getting Thomas Satoransky and a second-round pick from Utah. So essentially, a second-round pick for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, which especially I know for you and me, Tyrik, would not have been what we expected was the value at Nickeil Alexander-Walker heading into this season, as we were quite high on him. But here he is now getting traded for essentially a second-round pick, but Utah pick him up for a bit of depth heading into their playoff run.
Good move for the Jazz. He's already kind of similar to Jordan Clarkson in a way. Like, they're both kind of like same mode. But, I mean, that's a good move, like, just to get some added, bench scoring. The Blazers, I just feel like you would think that they would get more value for all the pieces that they traded at the deadline, and they didn't. Like the Norm Powell deal, which we talked about last week, they only got a second-round pick essentially in return. And then flipping Nickeil for just another second and, like, basically roster fillers because Joe Ingles is on an expiring deal. Elijah Hughes is not going to be on this team long-term. So it's like, I'm not sure what the Blazers are doing, but for the Jazz, that's a low-key move, especially right now because they need help because they've been struggling. So let's see if Nickeil can maybe right the ship a little bit and get to playing like the most improved player we thought he was going to be.
Yeah, it's a solid small-time deal for the Jazz's depth. That's definitely really nice to see. I was really surprised to see the move off of Joe Ingles, though, just how, like, ingrained he was into their, like, team culture and just in that locker room. I really thought that he was, like, a mainstay of that team, a guy that'd probably be there forever. So it was so surprising, and it's like he's really the first player the Blazers have received that seems like, a piece you could build around Dame with, but then he's expiring. So it's like, literally, what are you doing? I mean, Dame's hurt too, though, so it would have been for next year regardless. But, like, it's just so odd to me. Like, what? The Blazers just don't make any sense. I don't get it. And then Thomas Satoransky, obviously, his value is not very high either. So it's like the Spurs, I think they were just kind of got a little bit involved. I don't like what they gave up really wasn't doing much for them. Of course, not even in the playoffs, not really any like needle movers lost. So another second-round pick in exchange for not much. I can see why they got involved here.
Yeah, second-round pick for Juancho Hernan-Gomez, essentially. You can't really go wrong with that. But, yeah, I mean, on the point of Joe Ingles and being surprised he got moved, like, I think we're just coming to a point in time in the NBA now where it doesn't matter what type of loyalty a player has shown within a team or how much a player has grown up within an organization. There's not anyone that a team won't trade at this point. There's been so many occasions now where guys just get moved after being with a team long term or being very loyal to an organization. This doesn't exist anymore. At the end of the day, it's just a business. And so Joe Ingles is gone. I mean, who knows? Maybe he ends up back in Utah anyways, but nonetheless, he gets moved. I was very surprised that the Blazers moved on for Nickeil Alexander-Walker so cheaply. I would have thought they would have at least given him a year. If you don't want to commit to him long-term, fine. But for only getting back a second-round pick, I would have thought they would have at least tried to hang on to him and see if they can up his value before they get rid of him for that little. But that's another interesting, and at least as far as I'm concerned, a bit of a questionable move by Portland. But good pick up by the Jazz for sure. Goran Dragic was the next one to be moved, a guy that's been expected to be moved all year. He went the way of San Antonio. They just continued to acquire picks on the day. They got a 2022 first-round pick back from Toronto that is lottery protected for this year and next season and turns into 2 second-rounders if those protections do end up being used. The Raptors end up getting Thaddeus Young, Drew Eubanks, who was waived, and a 2022 second-round pick via the way of the Pistons. So the Spurs end up moving up probably 15 to 20 spots up in the draft and only give up Thaddeus Young, who's going to be a free agent at the end of the year anyways. A nice move for both teams. The Raptors needed some depth. The Spurs needed to just move on from some veterans and get some more picks. And the Spurs did a pretty good job on the day of getting some picks. I think they probably had one of the most underrated trade deadlines.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sorry, I'll let you go first.
I just want to ask, since y'all are the resident Raptor fans on the podcast, why did y'all waive Drew Eubanks? Is he just not good? Because I'm not watching a ton of Drew Eubanks minutes.
He's not good. He's not good.
Is Is he worse than Kim Birch playing center minutes?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just had to get that out
yeah,
there.
he wouldn't have played over Birch or Chua, so he was
Understandable
gone.
then.
Yeah, he would have been
yeah,
really deep in that center rotation for sure.
I definitely like it for y'all though. I mean, that young, he seems like he's just gonna fit right in. Like he's just one of those guys. He's just gonna slide right in, give y'all quality minutes, and it just kind of fits what y'all do. Like y'all run that small lineup, often, and he's just gonna fit in. He can play some small ball five. Very unselfish, doesn't need the ball, good defender. He just does everything that you need. So W move, and you get rid of Dragic, who hasn't done a damn thing all year long anyway. So pretty good move. You trade a draft pick, but I don't really think that's too much of a big deal, honestly.
Yeah, from the Raptors perspective, I definitely see I think our two biggest issues as a team were like size and depth. And Thaddeus Young definitely helps he definitely helps the depth aspect, of course, because Goran Dragic wasn't playing at all. So I mean, you didn't really give up a player all in all because you gave up a guy who wasn't playing with him picks. So get a guy back to add to your depth. Our size still isn't great. I mean, you have like a Chuya and Birch out there, but obviously they're not the highest level bigs you want contending in this Eastern Conference. But I mean, at the end of the day, it does help us get better. I think the Raptors are one of those teams that would always capitalize on those late firsts. So them getting rid of those, I mean, really helps the Spurs rebuild, and I'm happy they got those. But I always like Masai on those late first rounders because he always seems to find diamonds in the rough. So definitely, like, for us to try and be better right now, good move, but just the weird direction of the team where we're like kind of good, kind of young, and I can't like tell if we're trying to build or trying to like push to contend. Overall, just a good short-term move. I don't really think it affects too much in the long term, I guess. So solid like B trade for the Raptors for sure.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, the Raptors got their core guys there as far as they're concerned. Freddie, Gary Trent, OG, Siakam, and Scotty Barnes. So a late first for a bit of a depth or a bench piece might have been nice, but they're not necessarily in that front office looking at, we need this first to acquire a top-end guy. So they probably were a little bit more willing to part with that pick. But as Fred VanVleet said it after the game the other night, traded away a guy who wasn't playing for a guy who's going to play. So it was a W move, and can't really argue with that logic too much. So Thaddeus Young comes in. Like you said, Tyrik, he'll fit in well. He fits in well with what the Raptors do. He's an easy glue guy to fit into a system, and he'll fit in and hopefully play in the Raptors next game. He didn't play, unfortunately, the other night just due to not really having any time to get comfortable with the system yet, but hopefully we'll see him soon. And some other smaller moves, Aaron Holiday was sent to the Phoenix Suns. They add a bit more guard depth in behind Cameron Payne and Chris Paul. Now the Wizards just got back some cash considerations. Wizards just moving on from a lot of depth that they just already had. And then we also saw Torrey Craig go back to the Phoenix Suns. He just continues to flip-flop between Western Conference NBA playoff teams at this point in time. He goes back, and Jalen Smith and a 2022 second-round pick head back to the Pacers.
I like the Suns trade deadline, honestly. I think, obviously, I definitely wanted more of a splash deal like an Eric Gordon or even a Thaddeus Young to the Suns. But I think given what was on the table, Torrey Craig, somebody who just does all the little things, and he adds more wing depth to the team, which they kind of need. And just an added guard, because I can't stand seeing Elfrid Payne get minutes when Cam Payne's out. I would much rather see Aaron Holiday on the court. He's younger, didn't have to give up anything. So I think it's a good trade. They already got their core set, though, so it's like these are just, fine-touching things around the edges. So I like the Suns trade deadline. I'll give them like a B+ because they got a little better. And Jalen Smith, now he has a chance to go, get minutes, because he wasn't getting any playing time since JaVale and Ayton have been back, and then Biyombo's on the roster. So now he has a chance to go get minutes, play with Tyrese. I like that trade a lot for the Pacers.
Yeah, this trade, I think it's very low risk for the Pacers and them starting their rebuild off, having Tyrese, another big man to put, and that rebuild, and a guy that really hasn't got an opportunity, so we don't really know what he can be. And then Craig, I mean, he was literally on this team in their playoff run last year, left, and then they got him right back. And yeah, you definitely saw him do a lot of those things where he just put his body on the line, do the dirty work. And I think he ended up getting hurt in the finals, if I'm correct.
I believe so.
He did.
But I mean, before he went out, he was definitely doing a lot of really good things for them as like one of the depth guys. And so I'm happy to see him back. I think if they're really trying to run it back and with how great they've been playing, he's just a piece that already knows how to fit right away because, I mean, he was just there. So all around, like, just really good trade for both sides, I think. Just helps both with what they want to do.
Yeah, I agree. Big win-win trade. Big Torrey Craig fan. I liked him back even in his time as Denver when he was really all defense and couldn't even hit a layup. But really good acquisition for Phoenix. I thought they needed another forward as far as depth goes, and they got him in someone who's comfortable with the system. And like you said, for the Pacers, nice little low-risk pickup on a vet that they weren't really going to need long-term. Jalen Smith just adds alongside Tyrese Haliburton now. You get another pick as well. It's a nice little move to continue the rebuild and good value on someone that they weren't really going to need long-term. So I think it's a good move for both sides. The Charlotte Hornets finally acquired some form of a center at least. Montrezl Harrell was sent to the Charlotte Hornets as the Wizards continued to make some moves on the day. The Wizards got back Vernon Carey Jr., Ish Smith, and a 2023 second-round pick, which is Boston's pick via Charlotte. Does this solve Charlotte's center problem? That's the question. We'll start with you, Gabe.
No. I think my short answer is no. Montrezl Harrell is a solid center who is probably best utilized as a sixth man, as we saw in his Sixth Man of the Year campaign. However, he doesn't really add that much on the defensive side of the ball. Sorry, I couldn't talk for a second. But it's like, what do the Charlotte Hornets need? What was the reason for their center problem? I'll ask you guys. What was the reason for their center problem? What did they need on this team? What was the worst aspect of this team?
Defense. They don't need another offensive center.
It was their defense. And Montrezl Harrell is not a defensive guy. So, like, yeah, did you get a center who's now the best center on the roster and improve that position? Yeah. But did you improve it in the way that the team needed you to? No. And it's like, so then why even really do it? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, you got better because Montrezl is better than Ish Smith and Vernon Carey. But if you can just keep Montrezl on the team and maybe he becomes like your best front court bench player, and then you like sign another better defensive center, then maybe, yeah, it works. But if you brought him in to be your starting center, I don't think this makes you that much better. So it's like, I would give it like a C for the Hornets and probably just a C trade all around because it doesn't really do a whole lot for the Wizards either.
Yeah, the Wizards, I just don't understand what their direction is after their moves that they made. But to answer your question, like, this doesn't solve the long-term center problems, but I think for the short term, it's fine. It's cool. He's better than Mason Plumlee. Defensively, this team, they're not going to try and stop you. They're just going to try and outscore you. That's just how the Hornets are. I just hate how the Miles Turner talk was so heavy all season long, and then nothing happened, which I understand he has that stretch fracture in his foot, so it might be a little like – they might be a little hesitant to trade for him right now. I kind of understand that, but – I mean, at some point, you might as well just pull the trigger. I know, like, I see Hornets fans like, we don't want to trade Book Knight. We'll trade P.J. Washington, this and that. I'm just like, you got to go all in, man. This center issue has been a problem for the last few years. I mean, you've had Bismack Biyombo, now Mason Plumlee. You've had Cody Zeller. It's just been an issue, and you got to solve it, man. And there was plenty of guys on the market that could have helped that problem, but they decided not to pull the trigger. But for the short term, it's a fine move. It's not going to move the needle too much, but it's better than Mason Plumlee getting a lot of minutes. I'll say that much.
Yeah, the Montrezl Harrell trade for me was definitely just a short-term move. It's an expiring contract. It doesn't fix their most immediate problems, which is defense, and most specifically for his position, rim protection. Eventually, they're going to have to commit to getting someone in free agency or via trade. Even if they do re-sign Harrell, he's not going to be their long-term fix because their offense is great and they have some nice pieces, but it's hard to win in the NBA without at least an average to above average defensive center. So eventually they're going to have to figure that one out. But for now, it's an okay pickup. I think that C rate all around is pretty fair. The Wizards aren't getting anything significant back. The Hornets kind of fill a gap for the time being, but it's nothing significant. Moving on to probably one of the more balanced 4-team trades I've ever seen in recent NBA history. The Bucks, Clippers, Kings, and Pistons all got involved in a 4-team deal. We'll kind of just talk about this one separately, team by team, for a little bit, instead of it just being a little bit all too confusing. But starting off with the Bucks got Serge Ibaka from the Clippers. They also got 2 second-round picks, one via Sacramento, one via Detroit. They ended up trading away Dante DiVincenzo, Rodney Hood, and Semi Ojeleye. So the Bucks do end up getting another big, with Brook Lopez's health still a little bit up in the air. What do we think, Gabe, about the move, Serge Ibaka, bringing in a vet who ultimately stopped their playoff run a couple of years ago with Toronto?
You know, I like him as like a depth big for them. I think I would still prefer for them to start Bobby Portis at center. And then Giannis is going to play some minutes there. But Serge is a guy who hasn't had to play contributing basketball for like a couple of years now, because whenever he's been healthy for the Clippers, Kawhi and PG haven't both been there. So I'm happy to see him back in a situation where he can actually contribute and win, because for the veteran he is, he can definitely provide some good rim protection, which is something that maybe a Bobby Portis-led like unit, well, not led unit, but him at the center position might not offer. So in certain matchups, say if you have like an Embiid on the court or something, if you're trying to make a run in this Eastern Conference, Serge Ibaka is definitely a guy who you're probably going to have for some like specific usage. But I think that's something that this team definitely needed, because, I mean, Brook Lopez has spent a lot of the year injured. I don't know when he's coming back. But Serge Ibaka, for that specific role of just getting some nice like defense and rim protection in, maybe some floor spacing too, he definitely does a lot of what you want. And that's just a really good guy. Dante DiVincenzo, who they gave up in this case, I think they had already like agreed to a trade for him before, but it fell through or something. So then their relationship with him was super awkward. And so them like finally getting off of him, obviously it was just going to be weird to have him in the building. So I think for a guy who was kind of already on the way out, them using that to just be a good team addressing one of their needs, definitely very helpful in this just giant trade. I feel like they came out on the better end of it when they didn't even really have to be involved.
Yeah, I couldn't have said that any better, Gabe. I mean, Serge, he's not as good as he used to be, but as a reserve big, I think he will be very helpful, especially since they don't really have that on this roster right now. So good trade. They gave up Dante, but they made it known that he's expendable on this team. And, I don't think they'll really miss him too much. They won a championship without him last year. So I think this is a very good move by them. And to get 2 second-round picks, that's also pretty good value.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree. Pat Connaughton apparently now being injured is going to hurt that a little bit more, but knowing that, definitely a nice move, and he should still hopefully be back in and around the playoffs anyway, so they should be okay. The Clippers, they were probably the least significant team in this move as far as the return got. They only get Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye, and Vanja Marinkovic, which I can't even say I've heard of, no disrespect to him, but he doesn't even have a clickable link on NBA.com, so I think that tells me what I need to know. It's okay value for Serge Ibaka, but it is what it is. Ultimately, it's an expiring contract on a veteran big.
Hey, when dude turns into a superstar, this clip is going to come back to haunt you, man.
Hey, if he wants to prove me wrong, I will happily have him prove me wrong.
Nah, this was just a money move really for the Clippers. We talked about this last episode, how, they was talking about making more moves to get under, I think, the luxury tax. And since they added Norm Powell's contract, they still needed to make some more trades. So this is just a money move by them. And they're setting up things for next year. So be interesting to see that team when they're fully healthy.
Yeah, on their side, pretty much can echo the same thing. Like, this is not your year. It hasn't been your year since the year started. They showed a flash of being great at the beginning with Paul George really firing on all cylinders, but then he went down and it's like, okay, now this really isn't your year. Serge is only going to get older. He was probably only going to continue to decline. So it's like, if he's going to contend, he needs to contend now. And so them letting him go to a different contender, I think, was just a good move. And with them getting under the money, it was just kind of a win-win for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. To give him his respect, Vanja Marinkovic, 60th overall pick in the 2019 NBA draft. So he did get in there as the last pick. He's currently playing in the EuroLeague in Petisi Baskonia, if I believe I may be very well saying that wrong. But he's in there. He's played 18 games this season, so fair play to him. He's making his money playing professional basketball, and I'm not, so fair play to him. The Sacramento Kings got Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Jackson, Trey Lyles, David Michino, and a second-round pick via Detroit. They gave up Benjamin Marinkovic alongside a second-round pick and Marvin Bagley in the deal. They get a nice few pieces here. Some depth, some guys that have just kind of been hanging around the fringes in Detroit. But Dante DiVincenzo coming back after we talked about earlier, moving on from Tyrese Haliburton and Buddy Hield is a nice move for them to fill out their backcourt.
Yeah, this makes the Tyrese trade not look as terrible. But yeah, Dante, he's the kind of guy that you need beside De'Aaron Fox because he doesn't really need the ball to be effective. He's a pretty good defender, can take on some secondary ball handling duties. Quality move. I think Josh Jackson, he's shown decent flashes in Detroit. Maybe you can get something out of him in Sac. Same thing for Trey Lyles, just another like kind of stretch big, stretch four. Cool move. It makes it look a little better, but it's still not a great deadline for them. It's not great.
Yeah, I think once again, going back to Kings talk, it's like for what they were trying to do, I do think that Dante and Trey are good pieces to put next to Sabonis and Fox. Like, and especially for Marvin Bagley, who they've completely given up on. For them to get a pretty decent return, like, that's definitely not a bad return at all. I think even if you looked at this trade and you didn't have the Haliburton trade, and then you brought these couple guys in, I even think that would have made you better, which that probably would have even been the best option for them. But even with the moves they made, like Dante coming in as your starting guard, obviously he's been there before, and he's used to playing as a lower option, playing with Giannis, Middleton, Drew even. I mean, he's used to that role. So I think he was definitely a great guy for them to pick up for what they hope to accomplish. And even if they were still just rebuilding, like Dante's still rather young. So not a bad pickup at all. I think he'll fit well there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the Dante pickup was a good move for them. Tyrese Haliburton trade you can maybe think a little bit less positively of, but they did a good job on this one. I'll give them that. And brief continuation of our international player lesson of the day, David Michino, French player, 2016 draft 39th overall pick, currently also playing internationally and in the Euro Cup. So a ton of international guys getting moved around on deadline day. And the final team involved in the trade was the Detroit Pistons. Marvin Bagley finally gets moved as the Pistons gave up Josh Jackson, Trey Lyles, and a second-round pick in the deal. And maybe this is finally the opportunity that Marvin Bagley can get to get some regular playing time, can figure it out a little bit more in the NBA. This next couple of months for him is essentially his audition with Detroit to see if Detroit are going to be willing to pay him this summer as a restricted free agent.
This was my favorite trade of the day. Like, I'm glad Marvin Bagley has an opportunity now. He's finally out of Sac, which I feel like that's been like sour since like his second season, with all the stuff with him, the team, his dad getting involved in stuff, and Luke Walton, and it's just been a big time mess. But now I love Detroit because they give guys opportunities. They did it with Josh Jackson. They've done it with Trey Lyles. They have a bunch of guys on their roster right now that are like on their second or third teams, and they're still super young, but they're just giving them a chance to hoop. And now, like you said, this is his chance to earn his pay and earn a spot in Detroit now, since he's going to hit restricted free agency this summer. And I think he still has some good basketball in him. He's shown so many good flashes. It's just a matter of staying healthy and just being able to put it all together. So Cade, I think it's going to be a nice chance for him to really hoop. So shout out to Marvin Bagley. I hope he breaks through and gets that nasty label off of him, man, because all people know him for is being drafted one spot ahead of Luka Doncic.
The Pistons front office is great. That's basically what I learned today from this trade, is that the Pistons front office is great. They've been drafting really well in this rebuild. Obviously, took Cade number 1, which I think it was pretty obvious he was going to go there. So it's not like you needed like a PhD to make that pick. But still, they decided to take the right guy, which is always good. And even when they had later picks, like Sadiq Bey, that was a great pick last year. And then while the rebuild's going and while they're not that great, they keep giving these guys these opportunities, and was like, brought in Josh Jackson. Okay, he's not doing very well, but he has some potential. Bring him in. He got his value up a little bit. And so then you trade him for another guy whose value is low. but his potential is even higher. They get Bagley. What if Bagley like gets his value up, and then they keep flipping that, and it's like while they're rebuilding and while they're not good, they use that opportunity in those minutes that they have available to just get better assets. Like they literally just get assets, make them better, and then flip them. And it's like that is the perfect thing you want to do while rebuilding. And even then, you get the like guys on your team that you're actually paying, like Jeremy Grant, who are still contributing. And while the other guys don't have to have big contracts, then he can get his fix of money. And maybe you can keep him on a little bit of pay cut if he falls in love with the city. Once it comes time for Cade's next deal or Sadiq Bey's next deal, maybe Jeremy Grant will want to stay around. I know he wants his big role, but hey, I mean, if he continues to progress, maybe he could get it. This front office is just – it feels like ever since this rebuild started, since they got off Drummond and Blake Griffin and where they were really stuck in that 8-seed purgatory, they said, hey, we're going to rebuild finally, stop just trying to be in that no man's land, but we're going to do it the right way. And I absolutely love it.
I couldn't agree more. They've done a really good job of buying low and selling high on guys and taking a chance on guys that haven't really been looked at that positively, at least at that current time in their NBA career, or people had doubts about the money they were getting, whether it was Trey Lyles or Josh Jackson or a guy like Jeremy Grant, who people thought wasn't going to succeed in that type of role and wasn't worth that type of money. And he's just an example of one of the many guys now they've brought in and they've upped the value on, and they've been able to get assets back for, or they've been able to just increase their value and have more impact on their team. So it's a good move for them. They get to trade away a couple of the guys they brought in to potentially up their value, that they did up their value. And now they got the likes of Marvin Bagley coming in that they can hopefully do the same with. And Marvin Bagley doesn't necessarily need to come out and be the superstar player. If he does, great. But just be able to see him provide regular, positive, valuable minutes on an NBA court would be great to see at this point. And if there's any team to do it with, it's going to be in Detroit, for a team that just continues to give opportunity to players. So I hope he gets some success there, and it's a good move there by Detroit for sure. Moving on to some Boston trades. Daniel Theis, he returns to the Boston Celtics. The Houston Rockets get Dennis Schroeder in his freedom and Bruno Fernando heading the other way. I'll pass it off to the Boston Celtics fan in the room to give his thoughts on Daniel Theis returning.
I actually I was so surprised that Dennis did not get traded until like the final seconds of before the deadline, because that's like the one trade I'm like, this is happening for sure. And it took almost all day, but it finally happened. I like this. Daniel Theis, he's used to the system. He's been in Boston. He started his career in the NBA there. So he's going to fit in, and now he can just play his role as a backup big instead of when we had him, he was playing starter level minutes. And he just fits like what the Celtics like to do. They like to, have a lot of switchability in their defense. And with him, Al Horford, Rob Williams, that's a very nice big man rotation. You also get rid of Ennis Freedom. I'm just so happy I don't have to see him guard pick and rolls on my team anymore. No disrespect, but man, like, dude's an amazing offensive rebounder, but man, he'd be getting toasted on defense. And Bruno Fernando didn't even really play, so didn't really give up much. We might miss Dennis's scoring off the bench. Like, that might be the only thing we'll miss, but I think we'll be able to supplement that in different ways.
My biggest critique of this team before the deadline was that I really did not like the way their roster fit together. And what did they go out and do? They got a player that's been there before and has fit there before. Like, it's not even like a will it work? Like, we've seen it work with these players, because obviously when he was there, they had Tatum, they had Brown, they had Marcus Smart, they even had Rob Williams when he was there. So it's like he is literally fit with this whole core. And so it's like, yeah, if you're trying to reverse some of that damage done to this team not fitting together, like, a great pickup for a guy in Schroeder who you had like no leverage. Everybody in the world knew he was about to get traded. Like, definitely maximized what they could have got back for him. And then, yeah, when you're getting Theis back and you already have Williams and you have Horford, Ennis Freedom now, does not need to be getting any minutes. So him getting off the team, it is what it is. And then Bruno Fernando, he probably won't be that much of a contributor. 2 years away from being 2 years away from being KD. So maybe we'll see him do something in about 17 years. But for now, I think it was just that add-in piece. I will say, I think we should lump this one in and talk about the Derrick White trade at the same time, because with them dropping Schroeder, I really like Derrick White as a guard on this team. And I really didn't like Josh Richardson that much. He was one of those pieces where I was like, I don't really like the fit. I haven't really liked Josh Richardson as a basketball player since his like Miami days. I don't know if it's just like watching the way he plays or like the fact that he just cannot seem to get very like consistent for long stretches. But bringing in Derrick White, I feel like Derrick White is a much more consistent guy. I played in that Spurs system, which really like rounds players out, makes them just be able to do a lot of different things. I feel like Derrick White, with him like kind of being in that system, he'll know when to take a step back, and playing with two more ball dominant stars like Tatum and Brown, I think he'll be a really good guard to have on this team. And so I think he'll fit pretty well next to Marcus Smart as well. So him coming into that starting lineup and maybe starting really either guard spot for them, because I know they move around where Marcus Smart is pretty often. Just I love the restructures they did. Obviously, it doesn't fix all their problems, but they definitely got a lot better this trade deadline. They were a big winner.
Yeah, I mean, the Derrick White trade, I love that move. I didn't expect it, but it was a blessing for sure. He's an above average play. He just does everything like pretty good. Above average playmaker, okay shooter. He can score the ball pretty decently. And he's been playing alongside like DeJounte Murray, who needs the ball, to really maximize his potential. So the opportunity just wasn't there for him in San Antonio. I think him coming to Boston, he already has Tatum and Brown. Him and Marcus Smart, I think that's going to be a nice little dynamic duo in the backcourt, especially defensively. And Josh Richardson, he was cool. He was shooting 40% from three, but watching him every night, it was just like he's expendable. Like he's not somebody that we just can't move. He's expendable. And I think Derrick White is going to come in and do pretty much everything he was doing, but maybe at a higher level even. So I love that trade. Even though you gave up a pick, you gave up Romeo Langford, I don't mind that at all, man. I think that was a very good trade.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a good pickup for Boston. This is going to be a really good defensive team, and they already are, but Derrick White in now, Daniel Tyson now. This is a really good team on defense. A backcourt of Derrick White and Marcus Smart. You got a really nice front court rotation now, and Daniel Tyson coming in. He already knows the system, at least to an extent. I know it's a new head coach in there now, so there's probably some more new defensive schemes to learn. But you're going to have an extremely comfortable defense in there with some nice additions now in Derrick White. I think he can bring a little bit more on the offensive end as well, especially compared to Josh Richardson. If they can continue to keep this hot streak going, they're going to be a team, along with some of these other teams down at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, that's you still have to look out for. I know Atlanta have slowed down a little bit more, but they still have upside. Toronto have been good. This is a really deep Eastern Conference, and I think these moves have helped Boston at least keep themselves in contention for that type of conversation as well.
Thanks. I love it.
There's just so many teams that have been good. But, yeah, the Celtics, when it comes to playoff time and you're saying when the stars shine the brightest, I think the fact that they have these supporting pieces now to keep them afloat and, like, keep them progressing throughout the long season, once it comes playoff time, they're going to be dangerous. And being low in that conference, they're going to give some of those top teams some real problems, especially because now with them having Tice back and then just pieces that fit better. Like, if they play a team like the Bulls or the Heat in the first round, they could make a push. I don't see them beating Milwaukee in almost any scenario, but they could give those other two of like the top three right now a really big push.
Yeah, I think the Eastern Conference first round might be one of the best first rounds of a playoffs we've seen in a long time. Like there is, like the 7 to 10 seed right now is Boston, Brooklyn, Charlotte, and Atlanta. Like maybe other than Charlotte, simply due to a lack of defense. If the Boston, Brooklyn, or Atlanta come out, none of those teams are going to be an easy round one win, regardless of who they play, other than, like you say, maybe Milwaukee. But it's going to be a fun playoffs in the East. There's so many good teams out there, definitely.
Yeah, and most of the teams, except for like the Bulls and the Heat, they made moves. Like they got better at this trade deadline on paper. They look better. So that's what I noticed. Like I think that's why this trade deadline was so active. It's because a lot of teams were buying. Like a lot of teams were buying in, trying to maximize, their value this season. So it's building up to be an exciting postseason, especially like you said in the Eastern Conference.
There's real parity right now. I mean, it's a better time to win now than any other we've seen in the past decade, really. You don't have any like big three Miami Heat. You don't have any KD Warriors. Like it's as wide open as it's gonna get. You never know. Like there might be another team like that comes along next year. So yeah, while you have the window open, take all the advantage you can.
Definitely. I've been liking to see it. It's going to be a fun playoff, no doubt about it. Two other teams that are hoping to keep themselves in the postseason contention made an interesting move, to say the least, that was surprising most people. Kristaps Porzingis finally got moved out of Dallas. He got sent to Washington, along with a 2022 second-round pick. Note this is a Washington team that will not have Bradley Beal for the remainder of the season and is also potentially going to be leaving this summer via free agency. Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans for the two pieces that went the other way to Dallas. Dinwiddie reportedly has not fit in well in Washington, and they finally get off of Davis Bertans' contract, which has not looked good since the day it has been signed.
Yeah, Davis Bertans is, I'm sorry, he's not a good NBA player. He has not been a good NBA player for about 3 years now. And you hate to see it. You really do hate to see it. And I hate to be negative, but he has not been a good NBA player. He obviously is a million times better than I will ever be. But at this level, you're not contributing. So it's like, okay, whatever. The main thing I will say from the Mavericks side, Spencer Dinwiddie, I have to be consistent. Last week I said I would love for the Celtics to pick him up. I think that he would be a good guard to do a lot of like playmaking, ball handling things. He's been really bad for the Wizards this season. So them getting off of him, they got better because they got Porzingis. However, Dinwiddie, I think playing on the Mavericks, Luka's obviously one of those starting guards, and I think Jalen Brunson is better than him as well. So I think that puts Spencer Dinwiddie as maybe that primary backup guard. And that being said, I think I like him there because obviously I think when we saw Spencer Dinwiddie at his best, that was when he was kind of that backup guard in Brooklyn. He was kind of their sixth man, especially during those like D'Angelo Russell days. I mean, he did a lot of really good things in that spot. And then I think he can also play next to Luka. If he can get his shooting back on track, I mean, he can play really well next to Luka and even play pretty well with Brunson. Having the ball in his hands a lot, I don't think that'll happen. So he's definitely going to have to go back to that less ball dominant role. But I think he has upside there. I think they got him at his lowest value. It's just weird that they gave up Porzingis. But I guess Porzingis' value also wasn't very high. And I just got to let you guys talk about the Wizards side because I don't understand what the hell they're doing.
The Wizards are in a weird spot. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. I still don't know how to process this trade. I can't lie. I know Kristaps, he gets hurt at just the worst times. So that might have been like a big reason to why Dallas was just like, maybe it's just time. And they just took whatever they could get. The way I see it, it's like if Dinwiddie gets back to what he was, then this is cool. And maybe this is insurance in case they just don't want to pay Jalen Brunson in the offseason. So at least, we got Dinwiddie under contract. But I just would have felt like they could have got more. I was like, that's just how I would feel. I feel like Kristaps, when he's on the court, he's still really good. That's why for the Wizards, I think this is kind of like a panic trade in a way because, like you said, Bradley Beal can leave in the summer if he wants to. So they're like, okay, we're just going to try and get the best player we can get to convince Bradley Beal that we're still trying to build a winning team around you. And I think the Wizards, they're kind of another team that's just been stuck in that limbo type of, like, they're like a 7-8 seed or, they're missing the playoffs. And they just might need to hit the full reset, man. It just might be time. I think it is time. And for Dallas, I also thought, like, getting Bertans back, he's just like a diet version of Porzingis in a way. Like, he stretches the floor, shoots a lot of threes, but he doesn't do anything on the defensive side at all. So it's like, okay, I guess so. I guess they're really bought in on, like, Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber. Is Marquise Crystal on this team?
Yeah, he's still there, I think.
He is? Okay. So I guess they're just bought in on that front court then, man. This was probably the most confusing trade, and that's saying something because we saw Tyrese Haliburton get traded. And this trade might have topped that.
If I'm the Wizards, I just don't get it. Like, if I'm the Wizards GM, I've seen even with, like, Porzingis last year and, like, the year before with, like, in and out, and then even but in a playoff series, you saw Luka Doncic with that roster and Porzingis as his secondary guy. and they did not get out of the first round. So how do you think that you're going to take Bradley Beal with like an average roster, if then Porzingis is the second guy, and you think that you're going to contend for something? What is if all three of us know that that's not pushing you towards contention? So how does the Wizards, why do you even do that? Like, what is your direction at this point? Like, I get it was just like, oh, Spencer Dinwiddie does not need to be here now. Like, the team doesn't want him here. Like, yeah, his teammates don't want him here. Let's get the best player we can get. But what are you doing? Like, what's your direction? This team feels like it has no direction. It feels like they got Westbrook and they're like, oh, we're going to push. Barely got the 8 seed. So then they traded him for like a couple role players. And now like Montrez is gone already. So, and you traded him for players that I wouldn't call better. So then you got worse in that regard. So it felt like you were like moving towards bottoming out. But then you make another trade like this where you get the best player back. And both of those guys are big men that don't play that much defense. So what was the point?
It's like they have a bigger log jam now in the front court than I think they even had before.
Yeah.
Like they have so many front court. They have so many front court players. And if I'm Dallas, I'm mad I didn't get either Rui back or Kuzma. Like, you're telling me like you're really just gonna take Bertans, who clearly probably has like the worst contract in the league given his production, and then Dinwiddie, who's been that terrible. And I don't even think they got picks back. Like,
they gave a pick up.
Yeah, they gave up a second.
They gave a pick up.
This is like the most – I don't know. I feel like some GMs were just like, let's see if we can just make the worst trade possible this deadline. That's what it seemed like.
Better. The Wizards got better as a team, and I'm still giving them an F because what are you doing?
Yeah, they got better, but they didn't really get better for real. Like,
Bradley Beal is not here for the rest of the year.
He's not.
What are you doing?
I don't know.
Yeah, like
weird.
At first I thought maybe it was to get out of money earlier, but it literally doesn't even do that because Kristaps has still got one more year and then a player option, which at this point I don't see how he opts out of. So they're probably locked into 2 more years there. So they're actually locked into more money.
I wonder how these conversations go between general managers. Like, I would love to be a fly on the wall in these meetings. That'd be interesting.
Definitely be interesting. Talking about a logjam of players in Washington, Bert Sands made some interesting comments. I think it was last night or the night before. He said, it's tough to have team chemistry when every single day the team is basically fighting with each other about, I want to get more minutes and I want a bigger role. And like, we went into the year, and especially when Washington were having their good start at the start of the year, like, they have a lot of depth. This depth is really going to help them throughout the regular season, especially with health and safety protocols. And depth is nice, but only to a point. Like, you got to have a certain level of guys that know their role, are happy with their role, and know what they're getting. And sure, they were dealing with some injuries to start the year, but like Thomas Bryant comes back from injury, and then Daniel Gafford doesn't even see the floor for a game and a half. You just paid him on a 3-year deal, and then all of a sudden he's just not playing. Like, that's the type of stuff that just kills a locker room. Now, part of that's depth, part of that's rotation. That's just got to be figured out by coaching and by a first-year head coach. I guess some of that stuff's going to happen, but you're throwing in that many pieces. It's not going to help, and Kristaps Porzingis is not going to help that. And you're not going to be on a competitive team still. It's still just an average team at best. And if Bradley Beal walks this summer, well, then you're even worse off. So it's a weird move both ways. It really is. I don't get it.
Theoretically, if everybody in the team wants more minutes and a bigger role, you should be pushing each other to get better. That's just healthy competition. Like, at that point, you got to be toxic.
Yeah. I don't want to blame Wes Unseld Jr. though, but yeah.
I guess when you start off hot and you go and you start off as hot as they did and then kind of fall off, if you don't have the right guys in the locker room to keep the mentality up, things can fall apart pretty quick. Well, I guess it kind of did. Bertan seems unhappy. Dinwiddie didn't fit. Nothing seemed to really be going.
So are we to the big trade now?
We are to the big trade.
Yeah, I guess we saved the biggest for last time.
We did.
Ben Simmons finally was traded, although we didn't expect it, at least a couple of weeks heading up to it. Things picked up towards the end. Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, a 2022 first-round pick, and a 2027 first-round pick were sent the way of the Brooklyn Nets. James Harden and Paul Millsap were headed the way of Philadelphia. It's nice to have the Ben Simmons rumor over with, man. It really is.
Yes.
I'm excited to see him back on a basketball court at this point. And James Harden gets his way into a new team for the second time, and now only a third team in three years now, I suppose.
2 years, actually.
2 years.
Third team in like 13 months, basically.
Yeah. Crazy.
You go ahead.
You know, here's how I'm gonna start this off. You don't want to see a lineup in a 7-game series. Kyrie Irving, Seth Curry, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons. You don't want to see that in a 7-game series. They need a little bit of, like, if they need some size on the court, they got LaMarcus Aldridge, move Ben to the 4, bench one of, like, Harris or Curry. Whatever you're doing, that spacing is great. Yes, star for star, that's one thing. But, like, Ben Simmons, not only the defensive impact he adds, the fact that now he can really be that inside guy with 4 out, whereas he was playing with Embiid before, who can be a little bit on the perimeter, but that's not where he does his best work. Now you can really play that Ben Simmons as, like, either making, like, plays out of the post. He can be a cutter. He could even be a roll man, to be honest. Like, it just opens up your offense, and you just got who's now the best defensive player on your team. Absolute W. Then James Harden, he wanted to be out. He plays a lot better when he wants to be there. And the Sixers, really at the end of the day, you gave up Seth Curry and Andre Drummond for James Harden. So you got way better too. W on both sides. I'd probably give it at least an A on both sides. You both are, like, if this was the conference finals now, I wouldn't be surprised. That's how good this trade was for both sides. And one last thing before I pass it off. Andre Drummond, I think he will also add pretty well to that Nets front court depth, especially now that they, like, don't have, like, Blake Griffin anymore, any of that. I think that he's probably, like, the least valuable piece in this trade, but he's been a pretty solid backup as well. So if he plays some valuable minutes, and especially as a utility guy in certain playoff series, I think that that'll be a good thing for them too. So all around, just gigantic win-win trade.
I think on paper it looks really good for the Nets if, of course, everybody gets on the court, but that's to be seen. That's been their biggest issue. And now, Kyrie's still unvaccinated. KD's hurt. Ben Simmons needs to ramp it up, I guess, is what his camp has said in the past. So once everybody gets on the court, it's going to look good for them. I'm going to focus more on Philly since Gabe just really talked up the Nets. James Harden, he has to hoop, man. He really has to. He has to buy in, man, because he's playing with probably the best player in basketball right now. Like, at this moment, I think Joel Embiid's, like, the best in the world. I think that's safe to say. So he has to buy in. He has to know, like, he's playing with somebody talent-wise that he's never had to play with, somebody that really demands the ball in a different way than, like, a Kevin Durant or a Kyrie Irving. Joel needs his touches, and he needs his post touches. He's not the big that James Harden's used to playing with either. So it's going to be an adjustment period, but he's a great player. He should be able to adjust. But, man, I don't want to see him, not playing hard because he doesn't want to be somewhere or him having to force his way out again. This is really his last straw with me. He has to – this is everything he needs, man. He got the best player in basketball right now. He has shooters with him. He's got Tobias Harris as a third option. He's got Matisse Thybulle on the wing defending Tyrese Maxey. Like, he has so many tools at his disposal. If he's not happy in this situation – he just might be the problem at this point. Like, that's really all I have to say. So I'm still not completely convinced that this is, like, the trade that makes Philly the inevitable finalists out of the Eastern Conference. I don't think this move really does that much because they did give up a lot of pieces too.
Yeah, it definitely helps them, but I don't think they're no doubt favorites out east for sure. But if Harden and Embiid can get chemistry quickly, there's no reason why they can't be one of the favorites to get out in the Eastern Conference. Their defense is not going to be anywhere near as elite as it's been in previous years. That's a given. Ben Simmons leaving and not having a defensive piece coming back is definitely going to hurt that. But this should be one of the best offenses in the league. Embiid and Harden have the potential to be extremely good together if they want to be. It's just depending on, is Harden happy? Is Harden going to put in that effort? And how does Harden's body hold up? I mean, he's going to be turning 33 in August. He's going to be signing a 4 or 5 year extension. And this is a guy who's played a lot of basketball, had the ball in his hands a lot over the last 5, 6, 7 years. He's already slowed down a little bit this year. And so hopefully that's not a trend that continues, but this could end up slowing down pretty quick for Philly if things don't go well for Harden. Hopefully they do. But this is going to be a situation that's just a play by ear for how well he continues to play moving forward and how him and Embiid fit together. And then for Brooklyn, this looks like a good trade. I like adding Simmons to this group. It really ups their defense, something they really need right now. And they get a little bit more depth as well with Seth Curry. And Andre Drummond is a nice big pickup for them as well. But again, this trade could look differently depending on what happens for them moving forward as well. We don't know what's going to happen long-term with Kyrie Irving net, whether he's going to be a long-term member of the Nets past this season. We already know that he's only going to be a part-time player for the playoffs as it is, assuming that nothing changes. So this trade looks good for both teams on paper right now, but it could drastically change depending on how things go moving forward for Harden, how things go moving forward for Kyrie. We also don't know what type of game shape we're going to see Simmons back in this year. So there's a lot to still see as unknowns in this trade, but I like that the move finally happened. It's good to see Simmons will be back on a basketball court and his move from Philly. This team has potential that's quite good for both teams, but there's still a lot to see with both of these teams to truly see how this move turns out.
May the healthiest team win. That's my closing words. Especially with these two teams, even in Embiid's history, may the healthiest team win.
I like it though. This was the highlight of probably like the best trade deadline ever, I would say.
I agree.
Yeah, I would agree. Let us know down in the comment section below what moves you liked, what moves you didn't like, any moves that you expect to see come this offseason, and any moves that you think drastically changed anything for the upcoming playoffs. As mentioned, one of the craziest and best, if not the best, NBA trade deadline we've ever seen in the NBA. So be sure to let us know your thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have tuned in to this point, we appreciate you. Thank you guys for tuning in. Leave a like down below, subscribe, follow, do what you need to do down below. We appreciate it. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Buzzer beater.